Hello and welcome back. Today's video is a little bit different because I did an interview with Ross Rosenberg, and so here it is. I'm going to be playing it shortly, but it's all about how love can turn so toxic from both parties, where if we are codependent, we're not understanding that connection and why we behave in certain ways. And so this is why we end up staying in these toxic dynamics for a little bit longer. But yes, please do go and have a listen to the interview. It's a really interesting talk and I hope that you enjoy it.
So today we're going to talk about intimacy, sexuality, not so much as the topic by itself, but how it impacts someone's self-love deficit disorder or codependency. And I know we've already had discussions about this, and I think there's a lot to be said. Where do you think we should start this whole conversation?
Let's talk about perhaps maybe how codependents find themselves with narcissists and how that whole dynamic of intimacy plays out, and how the codependent feels that they so want that connection with the narcissist, but the narcissist is unable to give it to them.
Right. So they're seeking safety, what I call love, respect, and caring. By the way, for those who aren't familiar with my definition for codependency, very simple and straightforward. A codependent gives all the love, respect, caring, and trust unconditionally with hopes that it will be reciprocated. But because of the human magnet syndrome, they're attracted to a narcissist who is unable or will not reciprocate. Then they stay in a relationship. So with that, we can talk, I think, more about intimacy. They give all of this with hopes that they're going to get something back. And so where do you think is the beginning point in these new codependent narcissist relationships where things go awry, especially on the intimate level? Because we know that intimacy is almost always the beginning of any exciting relationship.
Of course, of course. I think what happens to the codependent is that they are love bombed and they are put on a pedestal and they are seen for the first time in their life. And this is all the codependent has ever wanted, is to be seen. But then it's by a love interest, someone that they, they are beginning to, have feelings for. So when someone, becomes like that, they're put on a pedestal, they become obsessed with that person, they go over and above to give the codependent attention. This feels good. This feels amazing. And this draws that person in. And then they feel good about themselves. But then very quickly, we learn that actually all of that is taken away. And so the codependent then scrambles around to try and make up for it, thinking that they have to fix something because they've done something wrong. So which is why they go into kind of like people-pleasing behaviors.
Right. It actually reminds me of the joke that my dad said that I often say, what starts off as a soulmate ends up as a cellmate. In other words,
that's a very good saying.
Yeah, because of the human magnet syndrome, there's an attraction, and it is a deep, intense feeling of chemistry. It's a feeling of knowing each other. It's a feeling of excitement. It's a paradoxical experience of safety, not because it actually objectively is safe, but because the codependent can walk in their sleep, close their eyes, and know exactly what to do with a narcissist because that's how they spent most of their life. So they come together with this intense chemistry. And then from the chemistry, and this is a term that Dorothy Tenoff coined, and I use it all the time, is the human experience of limerence. And that's normal in all beginning relationships where you're feeling like you're walking on air. You cannot stop thinking and craving to be with that person, that you can't sleep or eat beautiful, loving feelings. But for the codependent and the narcissist, that is exponentiated because they have been living in such a void of that same feeling most of their lives. The lust is another part of the response. Each one of these can be traced to different parts of the human brain. And then lust, it seals the deal. And now codependents and narcissists who got attracted to each other through chemistry, through limerence, are enmeshed, and through sex, are connected in this enmeshed relationship, then something happens. As you were talking about, the narcissist takes off his mask or her mask, and all of a sudden they're not as happy as they used to be. Have you seen that whole process, or do you see that a little bit differently?
No. I completely agree with you. That's exactly what happens. The attraction, the chemistry between a codependent and a narcissist is just, it's like no other, and it becomes very quickly quite addictive and obsessive. But the thing is, whilst it's happening, it is amazing, and you don't even know that you're in it. All you know is that it feels just amazing. But you see, the thing is, it very quickly goes.
Right. It's amazing because they have been living in loneliness in the absence of any feeling of safety. So,
yes.
Yeah, please continue.
No, you are absolutely right. And so it then becomes safe. It then becomes wholesome. But of course, we know the narcissist can't keep this up.
And this is a confusing thing that gets lost on a lot of people, especially if they get their information on YouTube, because there's this demonization of narcissists. Now, I'm not a big fan of them, and I can talk a long time about why, but they experience attraction, chemistry, limerence, and they truly, unless they're a sociopath, they truly feel loved, seen, adored, and get lost in that feeling. It's not someone who's exploiting another person. But what the codependent doesn't know, and the narcissist, limerence, by nature of evolution, only lasts a short period of time. And people who are balanced and what I call healthy, and my definition of healthy is having problems but knowing how to solve them, limerence might last 3 months to a year, and if you're lucky, a year. And anyone saying more than that is probably lying, but that's my opinion. But to an SLD and a narcissist, that limerence spikes really high. I call it limerence on crack. They get lost in it.
Yes.
Then the lust and the sex happens, and then the SLD is in another relationship, and they are so involved and connected. Then it becomes, once the limerence slows down and eventually goes away, the narcissist goes back to his baseline, and the SLD then goes back to her, by his or her, it goes both ways, baseline.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, what we said, we have, that cellmate thing.
I think that's a really, really powerful explanation. That's exactly what does happen. It's that euphoria that the both of them do actually live in for that short amount of time. It's the kind of not normal amount of time, because you're absolutely right. It's something that's supposed to begin slow and build slowly, and it just builds and it just gets better, and the connection gets stronger and stronger. But I find, like with narcissistic or toxic relationships, they happen in reverse. So it's this intensity that happens at the beginning, and in the narcissistic relationship, you never return to that. It's only once and at the beginning, and that chemistry binds the two of you together. And the codependent keeps on wanting to make this work, keeps on wanting this to kind of last, but it can't, because the narcissist is unable to do that. The narcissist can't sustain it. These relationships are built for failure completely. It's when two traumatized souls come together and they're not able to see it. See, the narcissist can never heal in the same sense as, say, for example, a codependent. Okay, the codependent understands, right, I know that I can heal from this, I know I can move forward from this, but the narcissist can't and won't, because they don't have enough of self-actualization. So self-actualization, awareness, being able to retrospect, being able to really understand, take yourself outside of your body and really just understand that actually, do you know what, my behaviors, being like this has caused perhaps maybe these scenarios to play out. See, a narcissist can't do that. They can't take themselves out of themselves to be able to see it from another's perspective. It's always externalized. It's everyone else's fault that they are like this, because they have these big protective walls up. So it's always everybody else's fault and never their own. And that will never change. They basically externalize everything, whereas the codependent will internalize.
Right. That's interesting. It reminds me of something that I learned a long time ago, and I expanded it, but it's this idea that I call relationship math. And it explains why codependents or SLDs and narcissists through the human magnet syndrome come together in intense chemistry, and why that is exponentiated by limerence, lust, sex, and everything. If you look at both of them as horribly lonely individuals, and I use the term pathological loneliness, and who are governed unconsciously and consciously by deep reservoirs of shame, and that their existence in the world is painful when they are by themselves because that's all they can think about, at least the SLD, and to some respect, the narcissist, when they meet someone, and of course there's chemistry, human magnet syndrome, and experience the euphoria of limerence, sex, lust, and everything, they're escaping this existence of deep, profound loneliness and unhappiness. They're going from misery to this beautiful, almost perfect feeling. And in that process, they become enmeshed. And so I call that half plus half equals one. A half is a SLD who needs the narcissist to feel whole, and the half on the narcissist, they need the SLD to feel whole, and then they have to become enmeshed. And then the relationship is nothing more than a collection of half pieces that represents one, which is a half of a relationship.
I know that we hear that a lot, out there in society, like in songs where, I've never felt whole while being with you. But actually, isn't that just promoting that you're just a half a person, that you're waiting for another person to complete you? And I feel like I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think that's exactly what happens within these dynamics, because both sets of people, they don't feel themselves within themselves because of the trauma that they had, because of the deep wounding and triggers. They don't feel themselves. And so when the two come together, I think there's that commonality, but also that duality that exists within this dynamic. And I think that's what enmeshes them. It's enmeshment. It's not love. It's not a connection. It's an enmeshment.
So that connection, subjectively, I mean, if we can get, by the way, I know this because it happened to me. I can say it's because I've researched and studied it, and I've been a therapist for 35 years. But most of what I discovered was my attempts to break the cycle. But that feeling of loneliness, that pathological loneliness, bone aching feeling, if we look at my model of self-love deficit disorder, is right underneath core shame, which is the foundation of self-love deficit disorder, which is attachment trauma. But pathological loneliness is what the SLD is conscious about. And they will tell you, I will tell you, the existential dilemma for a codependent before a relationship is how to get rid of the pain of existing alone and the pathological loneliness that infects every part of their life. The narcissist, because of their personality, as you talked about, they don't have that much insight. It's more of, okay, if it feels good, it must be good. And because of just being human and evolution, biology, and the way the brain works, what is human that feels good for everyone is actually this temporary experience of relief from a lifelong experience of pain, loneliness, and shame. And if you look at that, you can see why the SLDs and narcissists lose themselves in the limerence and the sex, and why they find the only solution to that pain is to become enmeshed and be as one, because they don't have a frame of reference. The SLD's frame of reference is the sacrifice, the narcissist's frame of reference is take. And they, for this moment, and not too long, feel like they are excited. And what I see is this look of, it's like an altered state of happiness and joy, like all of their prayers have been answered. This explains why SLDs and narcissists, of course, they talk about true love, soulmates, love at first sight. They hope to find the fantasy that someone will unconditionally love them, respect them, care for them, to feel safe in that. And that whole limerence thing, which again is biological, they misinterpret that. And then the sex seals the deal.
You're absolutely right. They are longing for this. The codependents really want this. But you know what? Here's the thing. When it's in front of them, can they recognize it?
No. The times it happened in the first two major long-term relationships I had, a part of me was completely oblivious. All I can remember is someone who looked beautiful. Everything about her, eyes, face, voice, just seemed so naturally perfect, and how she understood me and I understood her. That was the subjective experience. Of course, I had no idea that I was escaping loneliness. I had no idea that I somehow would find, my oasis of safety. And then when everything, we talked about it, that the limerence, the lust, and everything kind of subsides, and you're left with the reality, then my experience as a former codependent and my client's experience is just like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Why does this keep happening? And that anger, that shame, that fear, everything that we know about self-love deficit disorder is never enough to protect them for the next time.
Yes, they will continue to happen if the codependent doesn't realize that they are codependent, and they're not able to be aware of what it is that they're doing. Okay, most of them do go, like they have this relationship with the narcissist. It feels amazing at the beginning, and then, like you said, you're absolutely right, they just sink down back into where they were. They were at this high, and then they sink back down. Okay, and then also a lot of them go in the mill, so meaning that they get discarded by the narcissist and then hoovered back again, get discarded by the narcissist, get hoovered back again. And this song and dance can happen for weeks, months, or years, until the codependent thinks, right, I'm done. So then they get into another relationship, usually with another narcissist, maybe not so overt or maybe not so covert as the last ones. They go for the opposite, but what they don't realize is that there's different levels of narcissists. And so they will repeat the same patterns because, again, they've been so low in this, they've been in this dynamic for quite some time, that they are seeking someone to make them feel good again. It's not until they are completely broken down, everything's taken from them, that they actually are able to think, hold on a minute, why is this happening? That they then realize, so it's the trauma, the emotional trauma, that cracks them open, and then they have to build again. I don't know if this is a true enough story for everybody, but I'm generalizing here.
Oh no, I think you're spot on. But so when they have that brokenness, and boy, I can remember those moments, and heard so many of them with my clients, there's insight into what have I done. But what it does is it validates their shame. And if you throw in gaslighting, throw in fears, insecurities, the idea that codependency or SLDD is an addiction, and we can talk about that at another time, and understanding that if you should leave and you believe you're essentially not lovable, you're going to experience that loneliness again, which is the withdrawal symptom. Then all that insight that you're talking about, all that learning, it gets overpowered by your fear. Either the fear that was inculcated through gaslighting, or the fear that you've experienced your whole life of being alone. And that's why they stay. The foundation of this problem is the lack of self-love caused by the unconscious influences of attachment trauma. So unconscious, they're dissociated. They don't know that what keeps drawing them back is more powerful than conscious thought. And so they can benefit from excellent psychotherapy and such as by a person from you. But when we get them ready to meet the next person, they're going to have the same thing that every other SLD has. And it's what I call the broken picker, or the phenomenon that my therapist once told me, falling in love with the same person, but with a different face. And no matter how much they learn, no matter how much they progress, those deeper unconscious experiences infect this human magnet syndrome process. This is why product placement, and for you that I'm showing my book, but this is why my book is moving to its 3rd edition, and it's in 12 languages, and it has sold a lot of copies because no one has an explanation. It just keeps happening. And if it keeps happening, you have your own story, your own narrative. And so my ambition in writing my human magnet syndrome books is to give people an explanation. And I don't mean to generalize, but 90% of the people that read it go, oh my gosh, I now know. I now have it in words from my experience.
Before we finish up, I just wanted to say that it's been a really interesting discussion that we've had about codependency. I hope that a lot of people who are listening today will be able to kind of understand and be able to identify what's going on for them and be able to get, the help and the resources that they need or that they want to. But just wanted to say that actually there are things that you can do if you find yourself, in codependency, if you find it or you identify as codependent. I think the first thing that you really have to do is kind of understand that it's not your fault.
It's not your fault. That is such an important suggestion. Spot on. Because what entraps codependence in these relationships, whether it's real or not, is this belief that it's all your fault. And because it's your fault, you might not do any better than what you have. So absolutely, it's not your fault, but the solution requires the courage to understand that part you're responsible in. It keeps putting you with, as my therapist said, the same person, but with a different face.
So it's about taking responsibility for moving forward from this, not blaming yourself. This is about understanding that this is something, an experience that you have gone through for a really, really long time. And now you don't want to be trapped in this prison anymore. You want freedom. And so this is what you're doing. You are buying your freedom. You are getting free. And this is what I mean about leveling up. It's about becoming strong within yourself, emotionally strong, independent, and knowing that it's okay, everything, you feel safe within yourself. So this ultimately, like with everything that I always say on my channel, that it is connection to self. It is all about that connection and trusting within yourself. It's about developing that relationship with yourself, because guess what? You are going to be in a relationship with yourself for the rest of your life. So you guys have to be good with one another. Yeah. So that's really what it's about. I think It's about having the courage to be. That's what I would say, and I'm going to end it on that.
Well, no. I have to completely say how much I agree. That's why you and I decided to do this, because we have that common belief. I just want to put a word to it. Everything you said, I use the word self-love. Yeah, so if self-love deficit disorder is what we know as codependency, the cure, the resolution is self-love abundance. For all the listeners and viewers, check out Anushka's channel and anything she does. You are going to be quite pleased with her passion, empathy, and actually really interesting and accurate information. I know I loved it. And for those who are new to what I do, go to selfloverecovery.com which is the website for our Self-Love Recovery Institute. And you'll find information about a little bit of everything that I do and what I have available to other people. Anything that you'd like to say as a final wrap-up?
I would say that anyone who is facing codependency, please know that you can get through this. It is something that is possible. And it's like what I said earlier, just have the courage to be, and you will get through this. Remember, this all exists within your mind. You can get through this.
Oh, I love that. Beautiful ending.